All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Aparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. My name is Yen Ting and I am Program Associate with Aparo. So we are so excited to kick off this three-part webinar series on digital marketing. Today's session is going to be around website wins. We've had a lot of amazing questions already come through on our registration forms, and I'm sure there's going to be many more that come up in this hour. So let's go ahead and get started. You admit a couple more people. Okay, so I want to quickly start off by talking a little bit about Aparo before I turn it over to our speaker. Our mission is to transform our communities by working with nonprofits who are already doing the incredible, impactful work. And we do it and we help them by connecting them with volunteer technology experts and resources to help them meet any of their technology and business process needs. Our webinar series is just an example of how we are working towards fulfilling that mission. Our services fall under basically three buckets. We have advice, solutions, and educations. And here we have an example under each bucket. So we have tech therapy, which is our one-on-one consulting services where we basically help to answer any of your technology questions. Sometimes that can be done within one session. Other times it might lead into something larger. For example, what we call our community impact projects or our CIPs. So these are our larger, more long-term projects. One example of that is if, sorry, admitting a couple more people. If you are looking for a donor management software, that would be a great example of a CIP project. And of course, under education, along with our webinar series, we also have team trainings, which are customized individual nonprofit trainings. And then we have something new. I wanted to be sure to share it with all of you. It's called Expert Connect. So Aparo has been building a network of vendors. And of course, we want to be able to share that with all of you. So if you are looking for a service provider in the internet, like an internet provider or IT support or hardware, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you get started with that research. Probably more relevant to this conversation, we also have vendors who are in website design and development. So in fact, in the follow-up email, I'm going to be putting 3 of those vendors. So please be sure to check that out. Okay, 2 final things and I'll officially turn it over to our speaker. If you've joined us in a previous webinar, you'll notice that we are in a meeting mode instead of a webinar mode, which means that you are able to mute and unmute yourself or show yourself on camera. So this was intentional because we anticipate that this session is going to be more interactive. In fact, our speaker today, Eden, insisted on that to be sure that she addresses your current needs. And I wanted to mention that because we are recording this session and it will be posted on our website. So if you're not comfortable, putting yourself on unmute, the chat box is still an option. And finally, all of our attendees, all of you will be receiving a follow-up email that will include this deck, as well as the resources I talked about, and any other resources that might come up today. So today we just want you to focus on your questions and getting the information that you need. All right, that is it for me. Let's get on to why you're really here today. And I'm happy to now turn this over to our wonderful volunteer, Eden Estabrook.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see so many faces today. I am just going to share my screen as well as also let you know that I am currently coughing. So you'll hear multiple coughs in between my speaking, but it will be totally fine. Okay. Can everybody see? I'm seeing nods, so I'm gonna, all right, cool. Well, first to just introduce myself, I'm Eden Estabrook. I have been working in digital content marketing for a little over 5 years. I always like to put the emphasis on content because that's, there's a lot of different sectors of marketing, and content is one of the primary ways that you can get your story out there. And so I'm a little bit biased towards it, but this will play a really big role in what we're going to talk about today. So I also, in addition to working in digital marketing, I've also volunteered a lot with Aparo as a change agent. So very familiar, and I'm so glad that they had me on today. So why did I pick website wins? So with the way that the internet, with how search engines work, your website is working for you, regardless of whether you're doing anything with it. Every day, your website is being crawled by search engine crawlers, and you can either make that work for you, or you can just have that do nothing. Now, I don't want to get too in the weeds about search engine optimization because that can just be a total time suck. You could literally hire somebody to do that full time and they would probably never be bored. But with that said, there are still some small things that you can do on your site to try and help make your website work for you while it's already sitting out there. And that's really what I wanted to kind of spend the presentation portion of this talking about. And then as Yentine mentioned, I mean, I personally believe digital marketing and just marketing in general can be very unique to different situations. So I really wanted to leave plenty of time to do Q&As. For anyone that wants to learn more, I did add some links down at the bottom. You can see those continued readings. If you're like, man, I really want to learn more about how search engines work and, you know, why, like getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty about some of these things and those resources, I tried to pull those ahead of time. So, all right. So the Google search engine, which is pretty much what everyone uses right now, Bing exists, nobody does anything with it. So you pretty much want to think in terms of Google, unless your audience works with Bing, but I haven't really noticed that. The Google search engine is constantly being updated, which is why it's so hard for, especially with y'all being nonprofits and having smaller staff, keeping up with something like this is very challenging because when the algorithm updates, then they've changed the criteria, and then all of a sudden, like, some of your hard work could go away because they changed how the crawlers rate your page. So there are a few things that are almost universal, though, that if you make some of these changes, it will help. And so that's what we're kind of focusing on. And that's some of the whole that content hierarchy, you know, site speed, some things like this, where if we can make some changes, regardless of what happens with the algorithm, they're almost always a good thing and will almost always positively impact your search engine optimization. And also we're going to get to on the next slide. All right, so I borrowed Aparo's webpage as just to use as a visual reference. I'm an extremely visual person. Not just their webpage is lovely. I just looked at it and I said, if I were to try to optimize it for digital, what would I do? So I mentioned content hierarchy. So everyone knows that there's like heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So those are HTML tags that Doodle reads and uses as a way to determine the hierarchy of text on the page. So what it's looking for is, does it start with an H1? And then is the stuff underneath the H2? Is that relevant to what's underneath the H1? And it does all this like gauging. So when looking at this web page here, it starts at the top with an H2, which might throw off the algorithm a little bit. It would then kind of wonder, okay, we're going from an H2 to an H1 to another H2, and that might confuse the algorithm. So taking the content hierarchy rule in mind, we would recommend swapping out the headings so that it lists in that order. And that can be really simply done. You don't even have to change what this looks like, because a lot of people think like, oh, if I change this as the H1, like I want this text to be really big and we need that to be an H1. No, you don't. You just make it an H2 and then rechange the size and the color, and then it can look exactly the same. And that's one of those, honestly, updating headers on web pages is one of the easiest things you can do to start optimizing your website, because it's just a matter of going into the back end, figure out what's my header hierarchy. And then if it's going from 2 to 1 to 3, I mean, I've seen it where I've seen pages that start off with the H4 and, just start swapping things around a little bit and then give it some time. Also should always preface that anything digital, like search engine related, will always take some time to catch on. So definitely be patient with it. But it's super easy. In this case, the H2 would actually probably would be put well here, as long as we fix the H1 hierarchy up in the beginning. From a search engine optimization standpoint, you also would want to look into the text that's in the H1, because the H1 text is what is going to be looked at from a keyword perspective. So right now in the H1 on Aparo's page, there's nothing in there that if someone were to type for, nonprofit technology support in Charlotte, there's really nothing in there that would tell Doodle like, yeah, we need to pick up this page. So one thing that you can always do is when you make that H1 is check and see, is there any way that we can incorporate some of the language that we know people that we want people to be searching for, or people who would search for our services? Can we incorporate any of that language into there? As a writer, I always tell you, write for the human first and the algorithm second. So if it sounds stupid, don't do it. But if you can find a way to incorporate some of that language, I mean, I always recommend at least your city, because the city will help pull up more like local traffic. So if somebody is searching for something like technology help in Charlotte, North Carolina, then at least your city on your in your descriptions can help with that too. So in a nutshell, checking content hierarchy and seeing for that H1, once you've decided what that is, it would be then seeing if you can incorporate any keywords based on what you think people who would need you, what they would search. And then another really small thing that seems small, but it actually makes a really big impact, is alt text. And it's one of the first things to go, but alt text is actually read by web crawlers, so it can help with SEO. I've run my own website before and I forgot to put in alt text. Like, I just don't think about it in the hustle and bustle of things. It's just like, oh, I uploaded this page and this image, great. And then you go back and you're like, well, dang. So that's what these pink boxes are indicating here, is like, you can use your alt text as a means to, first of all, not only improve your website's accessibility, but also to help boost your web cred, we'll say, with Google. And once again, these are, I was thinking in terms of just easy, small things that could be made throughout to a website. And these are, and this is another really easy one. Along the same vein, always checking for missing meta descriptions or meta titles. Those are also big drivers of SEO. They're also easy to forget to put in. So when you create a new page, adding meta descriptions and meta titles are also really highly recommended and can also help with that as well. The goal would ultimately be is to remember as you're creating new pages to add them with it. You know, if you don't create new pages often, then, you know, go back and check on a few pages and see if there is one there or not. There's a few free tools that you can do that, but my favorite and quickest way is just to right click and look at the Google Inspect code and then search for meta. And then if there's anything there, then that means there's a meta description. If there's not, then that means we forgot it. So that's usually how I prefer to go about it. Once again, small things that can make a big impact for your Google presence. Sorry, y'all. The last thing here that I had, just using this page as an example, was above the fold call to actions. So this little blue box here, or this area, this above the fold real estate, which in essence means the space of the website that people see when they first log on without any scroll. So that is prime real estate, because once somebody hops onto your website, they're going to decide then and there if they're going to scroll or if they're going to move on with their lives. So it's always recommended to put something very clear on how to get them to connect with you on that above the fold real estate. For, you know, depending on what your organization is and what that need is, you know, that would determine what your call to action actually is. You know, in this particular case, you know, learn more or some sort of like connect with us call to action would make a lot of sense. You know, maybe it's, you know, discover volunteer opportunities, or, you know, you would kind of figure that out along the way. But I'm always recommending, this one doesn't work. This one doesn't help from an SEO standpoint, but it's just overall highly recommended from a digital marketing standpoint, is to make sure that your visitors have a clear path on if they're really excited about what they see, that they don't have to search for an answer. Right now, with the way that, you know, the technology has progressed, user experience is a huge focus just all around. You know, we're seeing it in just in my work in general. Like, everyone wants an easy trip when they reach a website. And I'd love to say that people looking to do good in Charlotte are different, but they're probably, they're stuck in the same mindset, you know, that of like, well, if I can't find the information I'm looking for, then I'm going to move on elsewhere. So adding something like a little button, I would anticipate would be very challenging. And it would be a great way to help at least make sure that that next step for that person is there. All right. Yes. So I know I think you guys will be getting this deck afterwards. So one thing that I wanted to do was include some free tools that I've used in my career, that if you wanted to implement some of these practices, you could these are good ways to help. The Meta SEO Inspector, it's one of my favorite things. That will allow you to quickly identify meta titles and descriptions for pages. You literally open a page and you click the button, and it'll show you if there's one there. And then if you have WordPress, the Yoast plugin is fantastic. It helps provide recommendations on how you could improve different pages based on SEO best practices. With that said, for a caveat for Yoast, it's going to recommend a lot of things. Some are going to be more time consuming than others, like word count can help with SEO, but word count may not always be the right move. So don't feel like you have to check every single box that Yoast recommends, because it's not a do them all, or you won't have any SEO at all. You can do half of them and it'll still help. Once again, that's why I tried to narrow this down to what are some of the smaller things that we can hopefully add on to help build it up. All right. I don't know what time it is, but yeah. So just wanted to primarily make this interactive. So just see if there's any. Does anyone have any questions? All right, no problem. Oopsie, dang it. Well, I know when everybody filled out this form, they actually submitted some questions. So I'm just going to run through some of those. And if anyone has any that come up that they would like answered live, we can definitely revisit them, but I'll just kind of go through the list there. So somebody asked, I'm concerned that our website has too much content. What are the bare minimum essential needs for a nonprofit website? So this is something that I would think of in terms of user experience. So is all the content necessary? I don't know what industry this nonprofit is in, if it's something medical or something with more of a bent on where a little bit further explanation is required, then I would just check and make sure, is that information needed? And then if it's not, is there a way to split it up? We have definitely noticed with the new generations, shorter attention spans. So the less, the better. But I would also just caution, don't remove essential information for the sake of removing information. The bare minimum essential needs for a nonprofit website. I mean, you got to think about it in terms of your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. So, I would just off the top of my head think in terms of like, okay, we need a spot where volunteers know where to go, or potential volunteers can go. We need a spot where the people that we serve can go, and they know that they would need to go there if they need our support. And then if you guys decide to blog, if that's a direction that you want to go, or provide content and resources to your audience, then a spot to house those resources. So a website doesn't have to be super like overwhelming. I think the main point, I think, for a nonprofit would be to try to get them to connect with a person. A website is supposed to be a kind of, think of it like a middle ground between, somebody finding you and being able to get in touch with one of the staff members there, because ultimately they're going to, your website should not be a replacement for your staff. You want them to be able to be guided towards somebody who can have that phone call with them and have all those. Can you? Yes. Yeah, so somebody in the chat asked about the difference again between how Doodle views H3, H2, and H1 headings. So it's just it's a content hierarchy thing. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's all a different level. And so what Doodle is looking for in most simplest terms are a logic to how those headings are placed. I kind of think of it in terms of like, I don't know if anyone did like had to do that, like the essay outlines where you had to do like 1 and then like, the A underneath it and then like, a little I, and then you go back to like a 2 and then you do all those little sub points underneath it. It's a very similar concept here. It's looking for like, okay, my heading is dogs, and then underneath it I have an H2 that's a Shih Tzu, and like Shih Tzu is the type of dog, so those two things are related. And then underneath the Shih Tzu I might have like my favorite things about Shih Tzus, and then you go down, you make another H2, and that one's about dachshunds, and that's still a dog, so it's all related to that one H1. But there's a logic to it, and so the Doodle is looking for that logic. So when you're starting with like an H4, it's like, well, hold on, this is all the way down at the bottom of the bucket and we're starting here. And then it's just, I don't like to say it confuses the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't know what it's doing. It's just doing what it's programmed to, but like, it doesn't, it impacts how Doodle views your website, and therefore it can impact where your website shows up in search, in search. So yeah, I hope that helps clarify things. If not, I can always give it another go, but yeah, it's crazy. I had no idea about the whole heading thing until I started really working in the industry. Someone else in the chat asked, what would you say is the most non-expert friendly website platform to use? We currently use WordPress and can be difficult to figure out. I think that's probably subjective. I'm a big fan of Wix personally. That's what I use for my own website. And I like it because it has a, oh gosh, what is it called? Like almost like an AI driven type thing where it can almost help design your website for you. I'm good at a lot of things. Design is not one of them. So what I did was like stick, it asked me for like my colors and, all like what are my brand colors and what is my goal? And I just filled out all these questions and it like generated a website for me. And then I was able to tweak it from there. So that's why I like Wix, because it really works well with my weaknesses, which is design. I'm not a web developer. I can do really basic things. But I definitely, I would not know for sure. I would not, I know other people that have said they love WordPress. So, I think if it's not working for you, then it's not the right one for you. WordPress does, I think have some benefits. Like I've used WordPress for a lot of clients. So a lot of companies, big companies use it. So I know it has benefits. But I do think it's definitely one of the, I don't like the back end experience quite as much as I do Wix. So. All right. I think that's all the questions in the chat. So I'll go back to my spreadsheet. Oh, got some other Wix fans in here. It's fantastic. Yes, I'm a big fan. My sister also uses Wix. She has her own website. She's the one that got me into it. All right. Oh, ease of access for capturing data. We have patients who prefer an easy way to share data with them. All right, so data sharing. That's an interesting one. I'm seeing patience, which also makes me wonder um, about HIPAA compliance. So when you get to softwares, that one's very niche. When you're looking for programs, I know I've done a few projects with Aparo where we wanted to figure out if there was a way to be able to store like some sort of medical data. And when I talked to a lot of them, they were like, yeah, we don't have any certifications that would allow our software to do that. So I think automating or getting that digitally would definitely be a hard one. If you're talking about just like web data though, most systems will like most CMSs like Wix or WordPress will provide some basic analytics, but you can also tie it to Google Analytics, and that's where you'll get most of your web traffic from. So I would definitely, if you're not connected to Google Analytics, that's free. There's nothing, there's no cost tied to it. And I mean, even if it sits there for 6 months, once again, it's at least capturing data. So I like to say your website is always there and it's always working for you. It's like your silent employee. So if it's sitting there capturing data and you don't look at it for 6 months to a year, then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I have Google Analytics. I mean, you can look into it, look at that year's worth of data and see like, oh, people really like this page. Oh, people really don't like this page. Like nobody visits it. Or like, it'll show you your bounce rate. So you can see like, oh, somebody hopped on this page and it looks like most of them immediately left. Maybe we need to rethink that page. Like, so what I definitely want to make sure y'all know is that this isn't something that you need to look at every single day. These are all things that you can put it in place, leave it, and then, come back to it later, because I get everyone's busy. And my whole goal around this webinar series was to make sure these are things that y'all could implement and not have to worry about babysitting all day. Because at the end of the day, though, with data collection on like your websites and everything, like as long as it's gathering data, it's not like that data will ever go bad. It'll just show you like, here's what's happening on your website. Here's what people like. Here's what they don't like. And you can revisit that if you have a yearly meeting to plan for the next year. Take a quick look at your Google Analytics and see if some of the web pages need to be something that should be addressed in the next fiscal year. It's just another tool that can help you out. Or if you see like from a program side of things, a lot of people are looking at one program versus another, then that might be an indicator that we need to invest more in this program and that it's high demand. Like, because especially Google Analytics, I feel like it'd be very indicative of people finding you organically. So that mean that this is a need. And so it can help you provide little insights like that. All right. Someone else asked, what is the most important information that should be on my website? What aspects of a website attracts and engages the most? So we talked about this a little bit earlier with that whole above the fold real estate. So what you want above the fold when people first log on is they should have a clear understanding of who you are, what you do, and why they should care. So, put yourself in the shoes of somebody that you serve and say, if this person found my website, would they know that we can help? And if the answer is maybe, then consider trying to make that a little bit stronger. And then as we talked about earlier, with some very clear path on how they can learn more, I think that should also be present on that top area of the page. And then depending on industry, you could also consider things like, you know, if events are a big part of things, then like maybe it would make sense to highlight upcoming events. And if you have like, if you have like resources that you want people to be able to access, or like, you know, like success stories, or like, you know, if you're working with, you know, if you're working, like if you have a partnership you want to feature or something that's coming up, then like think what's important, and then, you know, from there, see how much space that takes up. And then if you're thinking like this might still be too long, then just then start trimming from there. I always like to start, my personal methodology for a web page is I just brain dump all the information I think is important that needs to be on the page, and then I look at it, I realize it's too long, and then I take everything there, then I just start deleting what I think can go. Or like, you know, okay, if somebody talks to me on the phone, I'll probably mention this to them, so they probably don't need to see that there. Like, because ultimately you want people to not be distracted by a bunch of text. You want them to talk to somebody. You know, that's the same across all industries. Like in, you know, I said I work in tech, manufacturing, and like our goal is to get them to talk to a salesperson. Like your guys' goal is the same. You want them to talk to somebody in your organization so you can, you know, figure out how you can best serve them. So you don't want to distract them by keeping them on the website too long. You want to give them a direct path to one of your staff members. Somebody asked, is there a recommended ratio of written text versus images for a web page? Not one that I know of. Usually that hasn't ever been a consideration when I've designed web pages. The only thing I've ever the only thing I could mention is like the type of images that you have. If they're super duper like high res, they could slow down your web page. So you can always check the resolution of the images that you're uploading. Along the same vein, videos can also really slow down your web page. So videos are awesome, but I would definitely recommend, unless it's such a compelling story, it should be on your homepage. Maybe having a separate page for videos so that your homepage isn't slowed down by video when they hop onto the website, because those have been a big culprit of slow site speed. It's fun times. Y'all, Doodle is so finicky, like very high maintenance. All right. All right, somebody asked, what are some time-saving suggestions to keep your website up to date? It's an excellent question. I think I would recommend, at least on a monthly basis, trying to check and make sure everything, like particularly, I know one of the biggest things I see when I visit nonprofit websites is events that have been passed are still featured on like the homepage and stuff like that. So finding time to, you know, even if it's 15 minutes, just hop on, look for anything out of date, and then, you know, or in that spot where that old event was, just swap it out with an image of your next event or something so that it's up to date. Because otherwise people might hop on and get confused and then be like, wait a second. Oh, wait, this event was April 30th, but it's June. So I would definitely advocate for a monthly cadence from a, you know, from a SEO side of things, like what we talked about. Once you've swapped over those headers, like you shouldn't have to do anything from there. So I wouldn't, yeah, they said there's nothing else that you really need to do once you've done that. I mean, unless you want to really get in the weeds and try to figure out like, you know, some keyword research and figure out like, oh, what are people doing? But that can be a rabbit trail. So don't go down that road unless you're prepared for that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend at least a monthly cadence, and at the very least, just swap out the old information. And if you don't have time for all the pages, at least the home page, because most people will hop on the home page and they likely, there's a pretty low chance they'll keep bouncing around. So yeah. Oh, oops. Y'all on my computer today. All right. Someone asked how to increase SEO on Weebly based website. So SEO in general is very, very time consuming. If you have dedicated marketing people and that's something that you want to pursue, there are several strategies that can be taken. It would always start with keyword research. You'd want to figure out what keywords you want to be ranking for, and then you'd have to create content that's optimized for those keywords. And so that's where it becomes a time suck. That's what I got paid to do, is write content for companies that wanted good SEO and they didn't have the time themselves to do it. So if you have the time and resources and decide that that's something you want to go down to, that's how you're really going to make some of the biggest gains in SEO. Like, you know, I wrote an article myself on human trafficking resources in Charlotte, North Carolina, and somebody found it because they looked up human trafficking resources. So that's kind of what you're going for, is like, you know, you would make content that aligns with what you're trying to get rankings for, and then you would optimize it accordingly along the way. But that requires time to make the content, that requires time to, you know, optimize the content, requires time to determine what keywords you want to rank for. So if you're considering SEO, definitely take into account how big of an undertaking it is. Additionally, as I talked to you about earlier, Google is always changing their algorithm. So once you think you've got a handle of SEO, it's probably going to change. They rolled out a giant core update a little while ago, and it wrecked a lot of my clients' SEO, like just big drops. And was it anything we could deal with? No. I mean, it's just the way Google just changed their scoring requirements, and they were just like, yeah, instead of this being an indication of good SEO, like, we're now making this. And so we're like, great. So I definitely always, I mean, I think SEO is really fun, but I also like to just caution ahead of time that it's not something that you can just like casually do, because Google also looks into the cadence that you post. So you know, they usually recommend once a month, which can be very hard to uphold. So not that it's an end deal, you can do it longer than that, but you know, Google is looking for consistency. And that helps build your domain authority and web credibility. And so if you just don't have the resources to do all that, then it's one of those best left with the more, just leaving it by doing the more small things. Somebody asked, what do you think of a calendar on the homepage showing events, tours, and such, where you can click on the event to learn more and to RSVP/purchase tickets? Yeah, so that's something that I would I think something like a Google Analytics or to figure out how your audience prefers it, because there's what I think, then there's what your audience prefers. And I think, I mean, I'm a big fan of calendars personally. So like, I would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's how I like to find information. But, you know, if you're finding that it's a bottleneck for your, for the people that you serve, then that would indicate even as much as I love a calendar, that something else has to be there, because we ultimately want the people that you serve to be able to get what they need from your organization. Yeah, in that particular case, if you're unsure if something is working or something's not, you could always, I said, if you're connected to Google Analytics, see if there's anything in there that shows like, hey, our calendar has our events page has a really big bounce rate. That could be indicative of somebody hopping on, getting really confused and leaving. So looking into the data, that can help you get some insight into what's working for them or what's not. And I'm not sure if they have a free version, but heat maps are also really, really helpful tools. The one I know I've used called Hotjar. I know that one's paid. I'm not sure if they have a free version or not. I can look into it and ask and see if I can provide that information to Yentine to provide in the follow-up. But those are also really helpful because it's like a click map. So it shows you where people are clicking. We use that a lot with our clients to show them that when they think that people are looking at their whole website, that they're not. I had one client that had like this big of a homepage, and then we did the heat map and people like clicked on like this little spot up at the top and nobody else clicked or scrolled down the whole rest of the way. So it's a really fascinating way of seeing like, okay, we think people are reading all this, but the data tells us we're not. So I'll see if they have a free version of that or a discounted nonprofit version, because those are also really helpful if you're looking to try to figure out if something is working or not working or needs to be refreshed or something. Yentine, how are we doing on time? I haven't paid attention.
We're doing great. You're on a roll. We got about 10 minutes left.
All righty. Fantastic. All right, cool. Well, I'm just going to keep going through the questions. Oh. All righty. Someone asked how to update for upcoming events or campaigns, which I feel like we already kind of talked about that a little bit. The monthly cadence would be would still be my go-to. Oh, okay. I'm glad somebody mentioned the Doodle grant. So our third webinar on June 30th. I'm bringing in a colleague who he does the paid advertising space. That's his area of expertise. And so we're looking to try to give you guys some information about that. He's actually worked with a few clients that have used the Doodle grant for nonprofits. So if you haven't signed, if you're not planning on coming to that webinar, definitely come, because he's fantastic. And I'm very excited that y'all will get to learn more about the paid advertising space from him. So definitely make a note to come to that one. Because yeah, I've heard about the Doodle grant. I've also heard it has a lot of asterisks involved, so you have to really know how to navigate it. So but I think he can help with that. What insights or information can you share on interpreting / improving bounce rates? Should we even really be concerned about them? Absolutely. Bounce rates mean that somebody just that bounced. They looked at the page and they said, nope. So you should care about them 100%. What you want ideally is you want them to have a journey on your website. So a bounce rate means that the journey ended really fast. So the reason behind that could be multiple things. They could have determined that, the information is not relevant to them, or they thought you serviced one thing and they needed another. And once they read the description, they were like, oh, they can't help. And that might be it. It could be they just weren't sure what to do next. So they just, moved along. How exactly to determine that, that's where a lot of the tools that I mentioned are going to help. Because, without so digital marketing is all data based. That's the great thing about technology. And there's also so much free technology out there that helps us, figure out what our customers are thinking, and that's where we can really leverage that and figure out like, okay, this page has a really bad bounce rate, why? I would start by looking at word count. That's a pretty big indicator that can be a pretty big turnoff for somebody if they hop onto a page and they're like, oh my gosh, 4 paragraphs of text. Like I haven't read that much since high school. Like, so that can always be a start. I think, yeah, so there's so many reasons that somebody could bounce, but if you have a bad bounce rate, take a look at the page, see, the people that you service better than I do. So doing what I said, like take a step back, try to put yourself in their shoes, look at it as unbiasedly as possible, which I know is hard because, like, I don't know, as a writer, I think everything that I write is pure gold. How could anyone not want to read it? But if you take a step back, sometimes you'll be like, yeah, maybe that was a little bit long. Or, maybe, the header image was so big that, when they came onto the web page, all they saw was the image and they're like, oh, okay, I don't know what to do here. And so they just left instead of scrolling. Like, do some troubleshooting there. And just, if you don't have any data tools in place, then at that point, I mean, you are going to have to do some guessing. So that's why I said I always recommend getting some sort of data tools in place. So man, I had a train of thought and it just left the station. That's okay. All right. What's a good bounce rate? Okay. I believe you want to aim for below 50%. You're not going to please everybody, so you're never going to have probably a 0%, but most recent data indicates like between 26 and 40. And now that number is probably always changing. So, you can always, if you're ever curious, just doodle it and say, what's the current, average for this. What you can also do, and if I'm honest, I've never had to do it myself, but I'm pretty sure you can also block like your organization, like your office's IP address, so that like when you're working, your web data shouldn't track in Doodle Analytics. But that might be someone at Aparo could help you with it. But I know it's possible because I've had clients that have done it. I just don't know how to do it. So if you have like this would make sense if you have a larger team that's always working on the website. If you're like a 3 or 4 person team, like, it should be fine. But if you have a large amount of people and you know that they're on the website, then understand that will skew your data a little bit. I've done it before when I was on web pages and I didn't realize that I wasn't blocked. And so there'd be some pages that like, it has a 10-minute read time, man. Then I was like, that was probably me. So yeah, I'm sure that there might be a tech genius at Aparo that might be able to help with that. All right, it's 10:56. So see if there's one that I can answer very, very quickly before we wrap up. So somebody asked, how can you grow your audience? I'm going to assume that that means from a digital perspective. So that would be the SEO that we talked about. So to grow your pool, you need to reach people you haven't already reached. So that's where the internet comes in handy. So because by then you're capturing organic traffic. So people that are just, innocently searching on the internet and they're like, man, I really need help. Like, I can't pay my bills this week and I want to be able to feed my kids. Are there any organizations that can help with, food insecurity? So they might look up like food insecurity, or like food banks in Charlotte. Those sort of things would be how you would organically, from a digital perspective, I should clarify, would be how you would grow your web audience. I also, from the nonprofit side of things, I also wouldn't be too concerned about like how many visitors you have per month. Like, I don't think that's an indicator of success. I think the indicator would be, did somebody find you like via this channel? And then were you able to connect with them and help them? And I think that's the ultimate measure of success for if your website did the trick for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Eden. I think that's all of the questions.
I think so.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for today. I feel so incredibly fortunate for your willingness to share your time and your expertise. We look forward to having you not next week, but the following week, June 16th, where you'll be talking about email marketing. So thank you to those who have already sent in your newsletter ahead of time. I've already forwarded them to Eden. Don't know if we're going to be able to cover all of them, but I do know that we're still going to be able to walk away with some pretty valuable tips from her live feedback. So we hope to see you all again in a couple of weeks. Yes, I will be sending the follow-up email. It will include this deck as well as the resources that Eden has shared and some of the resources that have come up today in this hour. So be on the lookout for that. And that's it. Thank you again to everyone for joining us today and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, Eden.